All right, let's dive into a historical showdown between two of the most influential books ever printed. This is a story of politics, rebellion, and language itself, pitting a king's official text against a revolutionary bestseller. So, what does happen when they go head to head? Well, we're talking about a conflict that literally shaped language, religion, and even the founding of America. In one corner, you've got the royally authorized King James Bible, and in the other, the Challenger, the incredibly popular and, you could say, pretty radical Geneva Bible. Now, this wasn't some quick fight. This rivalry played out over the better part of a century. It all kicks off in 1560 when the Geneva Bible is published, and it becomes a smash hit. It took King James I more than 40 years to even respond, finally commissioning his own version in 1604 to get some royal control back. And get this, even after the King James Bible came out in 1611, the Geneva Bible was still so influential that it sailed to America on the Mayflower, and they kept printing it until 1644. Okay, so let's meet our two contenders. On one side, we have the Geneva Bible. You can think of this as the Book of the People. It was put together by Protestant refugees who had fled persecution in England. This was the Bible of Shakespeare, of the Pilgrims. Then, on the other side, we've got the King James Bible. And this was a totally different beast. This was a top-down official project ordered by the king himself to create one single unified Bible for the Church of England. It was the royal successor, designed to crush the rebellious upstart. So why was the Geneva Bible so wildly popular? Well, it was packed with features that were total game changers for the time. For one, it was the first English Bible to have numbered verses. I mean, that alone made it so much easier to reference and study. It also used a clean, easy-to-read Roman typeface, not that dense, old-fashioned script. And, maybe most importantly, it was the first real study Bible, with extensive notes in the margins. All of this made it such a bestseller that it was actually outselling the King's New Version for a while. The King James Bible, by contrast, was an establishment project through and through. It was translated by a big committee of 47 scholars, and every single one of them was a member of the official Church of England. The goal here wasn't just to get a good translation, it was about standardization. King James wanted one definitive text that would reinforce the authority of his church, and of course, his own authority too. So with these two completely different origin stories, one a grassroots rebel, the other a royal command, you'd think the actual text of the books would be miles apart. But the reality is way more complicated, and honestly, a lot more interesting. And here is the twist. 90%. That's how much of the King James Bible's text was lifted directly from earlier translations, mostly from the Geneva Bible. That's right, the King's official version, the one that was supposed to replace the Rebel, was pretty much built using its rival's own words. Which brings up the big question, right? If they're 90% the same, what was all the fuss about? Well, the real story, the heart of the conflict, isn't in that 90% they share. It's hidden in the crucial 10% where they're different. And those differences, as small as they seem, carried a ton of weight. It really all comes down to the details. So let's look at a couple of specific examples, starting with a single word choice that gave the Geneva Bible one of its most famous nicknames. The Geneva Bible was widely known as the Breeches Bible, and as this quote notes, that unique identity helped it stay incredibly popular, even after the King's New Bible hit the scene. But where on earth did a name like that come from? It all boils down to this one verse in Genesis, right after Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit. The Geneva Bible says they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves breeches. But the King James Version, it translates that exact same word as aprons. Now, this wasn't some deep theological argument. Breeches was just a common, everyday word for pants back then. Using it made the text feel really accessible, really human. Aprons, on the other hand, felt a little more formal, a little more distant. That one simple word choice helped give the People's Bible a unique, populist flavor that people really connected with. But the differences weren't just between the two Bibles. Things got so interesting that sometimes a tiny variation created two different versions of the same Bible. This brings us to the really fascinating case of the he and she controversy, which happened in the very first printing of the King James Bible. So in 1611, two versions of the King James Bible came off the press. Today, collectors call them the He Bible and the She Bible, and it's all because of a one-letter difference in a single verse in the Book of Ruth that completely changes who the sentence is about. So check this out. The He Bible says, "And he went into the city," which would be referring to Boaz. But the She Bible says, "And she went into the city," referring to Ruth. A tiny change, but it has a pretty big impact on how you read that moment. So which one is correct?
You might just assume it was a simple typo, but it's way more complex than that. The scholars were working from different Hebrew manuscripts, and the original text was actually ambiguous. The context could support either reading. And this wasn't just a 17th century problem. The debate is still going on. Even today, major modern translations are still split on whether it was he or she who went into the city.
So this whole tale of two Bibles shows us something much bigger than a simple rivalry. It's a powerful lesson in how the books we think of as rock solid are actually shaped by very human forces. The politics of kings, the technology of the printing press, and the thousands of tiny but hugely important choices made by translators weighing the meaning of a single word or even just a single letter. And that really leaves you with something to think about, doesn't it? If one single letter in one verse can create two different Bibles and a debate that lasts for centuries, what other amazing, complex, and important stories are hiding just beneath the surface of the words we read every single day?